This is the Allura Code, a transmission for creators, sensitives, and visionaries who know they're built for more, who can feel the signal beneath the noise. Here we decode the hidden patterns running your life, the ones shaping your wealth, your relationships, your body, your art. It blends human design, field energetics, ancient tech, and quantum energetic architecture to recalibrate your system back to truth. You will learn to tune into your body, recognize what truth feels like, and use that as your guidance. This is a multidimensional approach to allow the whole of your being to come together in a convergence of self-discovery and alignment so that you may begin live from full alignment and press play on life. This isn't self-help, it's self-remembrance. Each episode is a map, a key, a mirror. If you dare to meet the real you beneath the programming, welcome home to the Allura Code.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So the whole point of the conversation today, Lucy, is it's a couple of things. I'm gonna take those off. Is that I really want to get a sense of your journey over the last few years in transitioning from real estate into psychotherapy, and kind of the motivations behind it. I mean, I know just as well as you do what real estate is like, and it's a very outward type of aggressive energy industry. Whereas I would imagine psychotherapy is a lot more, there's a lot more compassion involved. There's a lot more presence involved. You're creating safe space with people in order to, in order to facilitate change. So, yeah. So maybe start there. Just introduce yourself. And this is Lucy Senko. And just talk a little bit about that transition. And then we'll just kind of take it where it needs to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hello again. First of all, thank you. I'm very excited about this and having this conversation and kind of, your interest and my view and how I see things and why I transition. So I really appreciate this.
Oh no, my pleasure. I mean, that's why I'm doing this, right? It's to, it's basically about creating awareness. So,
yeah. So yes, you're right. I was in real estate. That's how we met, right? We worked for the same brokerage.
We used to work together.
That's right. And then slowly I did transition because funny enough, I always wanted to be into psychology field, into, kind of psychotherapy, but I didn't know back when I was younger. I was finishing my undergrad degree, which was in statistics, major in statistics, and double minor in psychology and mental health and Buddhist psychology. So I had a little bit of experience. But I think I thought I need to get a master's, I need to get a PhD to become a psychologist and to be able kind of to do what I'm doing right now. What I'm doing right now, I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying. The qualifying part means that I'm in my practicum right now. So I'm working with people. However, I still need to get some hours to graduate and to get some hours to drop the qualifying part and become qualified, right? So it's still a process for sure. I don't have years of experience. I'm pretty fresh in this. I do have a couple years of schooling under my belt in the counseling field. So why I transitioned, I guess maybe the short story is I come from a lot of trauma in my background. And when I had kids, all of the stuff kind of start bubbling up, right? You start getting triggered. A lot of things kind of really came to surface. And one of my friends who was a psychotherapist actually said, I told her, I'm like, listen, I really want to be a better parent. And she said, well, a lot of times we need to look inside and kind of, heal our traumas to become better parents. And that's how my journey into psychotherapy started. So I went to psychotherapy and I saw a huge change with myself. And that kind of also made me like really considering becoming a psychotherapist myself. But it also was like, well, I have 2 kids now, I'm older now, it's a lot, right? So then one of my friends, my other friend, she was doing her master's in, this other field. And I was like, how are you doing? She's like, I don't know, I'm just doing it. And I was like, it gave me a little bit of courage kind of seeing someone else doing it and, going through it. So I was like, I'll just try it. So I was very lucky that my husband was kind of got on board with it. And trust me, I wanted to switch careers between being a real estate agent to other things, and he was never on board. So kind of the stars aligned, and he realized, I guess, that it is my true calling in some ways. And that's how I got into it. And I'll be honest with you, it's been a long journey for me where I started, how I was looking at things, where my empathy was, where my compassion was for people when I started, where it is now, right? Because and then also my own journey in like healing and growth, also very different now, right? So in psychotherapy, we say as a psychotherapist, you can only take your clients as deep as you want yourself. And I've been really deep into really dark places, right? So that's why I feel way more comfortable taking on clients with trauma, with like a lot of heavy stuff, because I know I've been there and I can handle it. I can create the space. However, still, it's not. How they always say it's a journey. It is a journey. There's never ending point. I'm still in therapy myself, right? I'm a therapist who goes to therapy, and I think this is a beautiful thing, because I'm still growing. I'm still learning. There's still so many things that kind of come up and really require attention, and even with our working clients, there's such notions as transference and counter transference, right? So transference is when a client working with you, something comes up for them because of you, and counter transference, it's the other way. As a therapist, when you're working with client and you got like some kind of feelings or some traumas getting triggered, you really got to take a look at that, right? So like it's like we're all holding mirrors to each other in a sense. So again, long story short, condensed
Okay.
is yeah, it's just I always felt like it was my true calling. And when I felt that the strength, when I believed in myself that I can do it, that's when I took the path and I started doing it.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's funny that you mentioned the transference and countertransference, because there's a concept in the spiritual community which effectively says the same thing. So in some circles, people will talk about the law of attraction as, you become a vibrational match to whatever it is you're trying to create, which is true.
Yeah.
And from a reference point, it can also be called the law of mirroring, which is basically what you just said. And that transference, countertransference is a very kind of deeper, nuanced way of looking at things, because everything for a lot of people is always an outward projection, but it's through the filter of their experience.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that everybody has trauma to some extent. There's the small T's and there's the big T's. I've done I've had a lot of my own challenges to come up with, but it's funny when we start to match this with some of the other stuff that I'm doing as part of this, kind of like what we talked about last week. It all kind of starts to come together and make sense. But as far as this concept goes, it really gives us the opportunity to A, create space, and B, as you said, to get in there, because there really is no depth to what we can explore and what we can learn and figure out, because it basically becomes, so when there's a trigger, it basically becomes a portal into expansion and growth.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really exciting, because the expansion part is it's uncovering parts of yourself that you were never aware of. And I don't mean that the parts that have been traumatized. I mean the parts of you that are trying to reconnect with that part of you that's traumatized. Because when something like this happens, there's a split in consciousness. So you have one stream going this way, and you have that gets severed off from the piece here. So the piece that gets severed off is the piece that gets traumatized, because the way our culture works is that we never really allow or give the mind and body time to synthesize, process it, and then give it time to actually reintegrate it. So I just think that was that,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
that's what you said, exactly what you just said, right? Like, and it's kind of really, really aligns with what that. So there's different therapeutic approaches you can work with. Many people know about CBT, cognitive behavior therapy.
Mm.
This is not the approach I'm using, right? And I don't have nothing against this full literature. It just doesn't take you as deep.
No.
I like going deep. And what you mentioned, something that really kind of like aligns with where I'm working, and it's funny because we never talked about it. It's called IFS, Internal Family System.
Okay.
Internal family system is basically a theory, it's approach. It's also researched and proven that inside of us, like you said, like that consciousness gets like severed or split. That's exactly what it is. We all have these parts, the parts of us. So there's parts they're called managers, the self-critic, the one that gets us going, the ones get like, yes, 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 can do it, right? For example. And there's firefighters, the parts that the anger, that's when we feel angry, when we, get addicted to things, when we overeat and binge and stuff like this, right? They come up when we in emotional pain, and they try to soothe it. They try to kind of like not overwhelm the system by kind of covering up the wound. And the wounded part is called an exile, right? And we all have it,
Okay.
and it is created. So when a trauma happens, and again, as you said, it doesn't have to be big T trauma, it can be little T trauma, right? Especially when we're children or growing up, this exiled part gets really wounded, and it starts overwhelming the system. So the firefighter, the part of us, come in and grows to protect, right? So in therapy, in IFS, and internal family systems, what we're trying to do, we're trying to understand all the parts and see what are they trying to protect, and then burden them, right? And then kind of, I want to say marry them all together, but not in the sense marry them, but kind of make them all friends, understand them, accept them. And we can only do it being in the self, right? There's another part of us when we feel compassionate, when we feel confident, when we feel calm, when there is just this peace, internal peace that's always exists. But sometimes we get so over identified with other parts, but we can feel it. So in therapy, what we do, we try to help clients find that self. And when the parts see the self, with the help of the self, we call it self energy, authentic self, wherever it is, you can actually unburden the parts. You can help the parts heal. They can show the exile. You can meet the exile. It's not about fighting the parts and getting rid of them. It's about accepting them and loving them, and giving them compassion. And that's when they can unburden and be seen, right? So it goes very kind of a little bit against what we usually do. We say, okay, we have an anxiety, we got to deal, we got to fight with it, right? We have depression, we got to fight with it. It's kind of fighting fire with fire. We don't do that. It's more about the acceptance. It's more about understanding, uncovering what it is, right? And doing this all from this sense of self, right? From this self energy. And I saw you kind of like you were getting very excited, because I feel like it aligns with what you.
Unbelievably, like,
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I love about this work, is that the and the other thing too is that, I mean, you and I always seem to get along, in all the years that we did work together. I think it was 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So when did you leave the office again? Was it 2019, 2020?
When I moved, I think it was 2020 during COVID.
When you moved to Whitby?
Or maybe, 2020 or 2021, something around that time.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's been a while. And so I love the fact that there is, 'cause I've been in therapy too. And in a way, I'm kind of therapizing. I'm my own therapist, in a way, because of, all this stuff that I've been able to uncover, and talking about, about going deep. Like, so there was a piece that you said that I thought was kind of interesting, which was, people or so, and this, there's kind of a couple of nuances here. One is, people can only go as deep, or people can only understand other people as much as they understand themselves.
Absolutely.
And then, so when it comes to that, when we go back to that mirroring piece, there's so much, there's so much that's unconscious. So for example, when somebody notices, and this could be a positive or a negative thing. So when somebody does something that pisses you off, A, they've hit your boundaries, and B, there's it's kind of a roll call, to go into that and see what we can find out. And we can talk about that in a minute, but then the other piece is like, say I pay you a compliment and about something about the way you do things or whatever that I notice. And what that really unconsciously is saying is that I see my, and whether or not you're aware of it. And that just comes with your level of your own personal awareness. But what it's saying is that there's something about you that you see in this other person that you're not aware of. So it's like a talent, and that's the whole thing about this is it's basically resonance, and whether or not things resonate with each other. So the guitar string example, right?
No.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you have two guitars in a room and they're both tuned exactly the same, so if you pluck the A string on one guitar, the A string on the other guitar is going to start vibrating and making sound. So the same thing works. It's the same principle with this, is that when people are on the same wavelength or in this within the same bandwidth of frequency, then these are that's when these types of synchronicities start to happen. And so so for me, it's absolutely no surprise whatsoever that you and I are sitting here chatting today. No surprise whatsoever. And like I told you the story, when I first saw your new Instagram handle and you made that post last week, I was like, oh my God, I haven't talked to Lucy in like forever. So I need to reach out and we need to have this conversation. So
yeah. And here we are having this conversation.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because especially with where we're at today. And I don't know. I think this work is, so what here's a question. So what are some trends that you're noticing with the people that you're working with right now?
So to say it's the trend, maybe I think the trend that I'm noticing, that people are becoming, that mental health and therapy and all of this become less stigmatized, right? Compared to even years back, which is fantastic. And because of social media, again, the social media is a double-edged sword, right? There is a lot of negative part to it, but the huge part of it is that awareness can be raised and people can talk about things, and people can say, hey, I'm struggling, right? And somebody can resonate with them and say, oh my God, it's okay to struggle, right? So again, and I think that step of, there is definitely, and again, this is not just my observation, but talking to other therapists, my supervisor and stuff like this. But there is definitely a trend of more and more therapists coming into the field. Absolutely, right? So because there is demand, so there's more and more people going to therapy. There is more and more of this, I would say, probably awareness of that we're not stuck of how we are. There is potential for growth, and people want to heal. People want to get better. They don't want to be struggling, right? And again, I have nothing against medication, and it's definitely useful. And there's a lot of very heavy, mental like illnesses but I feel like people kind of finding ways now to not just heavily rely on medication for anxiety, depression, so on, kind of try alternative ways like therapy. And again, therapy doesn't hit with everyone. There's also different type of therapies. I work with two modalities: IFS, internal family systems for individuals, and EFT, emotionally focused therapy for couples, right? That based in attachment and creating that attachment, a safe attachment within the couple, right? So there's different ways. There's CBT, there's DBT, there's mindfulness. There's so much to pick from, right? Again, and it doesn't, a lot of people love CBT, a lot of people do CBT. For me personally, I think CBT is great when you're starting therapy, when you're just dipping your toes in, and because you're not sure and you're not ready for heavy work. You got to understand, change is difficult. And I think this is the biggest thing that kind of was for me a big understanding, because it's so easy to judge someone's mistakes when you see doing them. Your friends staying in abusive or toxic relationships, people lying, people cheating, all of this stuff. It's so easy to judge until you realize, oh my God, when you start seeing, that's where the empathy piece and comes in. Oh my God, but it's so hard. Of course, it's so hard. It's so hard to understand our own faults and agree, acknowledge them and say, yes, there is big thing that I need to change, right? There's thing about, of course, it's so hard. It's impossible. People go through life without doing that. But at the same time, you see people kind of talking about it, saying, hey, listen, I'm doing much better. This would help, right? So there's a lot of movement, I would say, in that direction. Sorry, I kind of feel like I
that's
went
all right.
a bit away
That's
from your question.
that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, but I think there's definitely more movement of that awareness. And again, me being a therapist, I'm not, I don't believe in this therapy, this is the only way. There's so many other therapies, right? Healing therapies, spiritual ways, yoga, all other things, right? Like somatic therapies and stuff like this, or through dance therapy, art therapy. There's so much that you can kind of help yourself, because we are very similar. We all share almost the same parts, honestly. But at the same time, we're very unique. Again, because of that experience, that, like you said, that watching the world through our own filter, through our own lens, right? And I say it like this. I was just sharing actually with a friend what therapy is to me. Any therapy is when when you're looking through the window and the window is really, really dirty, and you're kind of making sense of the world through that dirty, dusty window with cobwebs and stuff like this. You're kind of trying to make sense. And this is what you're seeing of the world, right? That's how you see the world. And when you start therapy, any type of therapy, spiritual journey, wherever it is, it's like you're slowly starting to clean that window out, right? And slowly, it's a long process, it's a journey. But then you start seeing things more clearly. You go, oh my God, the world is completely different. The world on the other side didn't change. How you're looking at the world change. And I think this is a big part that people come into realization with.
And I would agree with that 100%. And one of the biggest pieces that I think people miss is that when we're operating from a space of fear, which is effectively the ego trying to protect itself or trying to protect us, but on an energetic level, what it's actually doing is it's trying to protect our bandwidth, so our actual expression. But unfortunately, it's the ego's methods, as clever as they may be, they're actually not that clever, because they're ultimately not that sophisticated. Because people tend to look at the ego on its own and kind of isolated, and they kind of see it as a, because I don't know what percentage is, but people are probably operating through their ego upwards of 90% of the time, and they don't even realize that there's any, that there's any other higher options or different options in ways of being. So, and this is where I have a where the whole term mindset is, I think it's just very limiting, because that only allows us, because it only really from a piece of the body, it only goes from here to here. But when you actually bring the body and the field in as part of the conversation, you are now tapping into a reservoir of wisdom that far surpasses what the mind is capable of comprehending. So, say the mind can come up with 3 or 4 options. you put the energetic field to work, and you can come up with a million options.
And this is sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, like, just as an example, every cell there's enough information in every cell to fill 1,000 books of 600 pages. Every cell. And we have about 30 trillion cells in our body. So go figure that one out.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's the thing. And like you said, first of all, I want to make a comment about ego. Before I got into the field and the way I'm looking at it right now, we always have this problem with an ego. We're saying, well, the ego, this person is very egocentric and so on, right? There's a lot of negative connotation about ego.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm saying and where I'm standing, let's not fight the ego. Let's make friends with the ego, because the ego, that's what contains, if you translate from your language to my language of parts, right? In IFS, it's what contains the parts. That's what it's trying to do, trying to protect. We can't fight. You can never fight the ego. The ego is not going to let go. It's here to protect you. It's here to make you better. You have to help the ego to do that, right? So that's one thing. And the second thing is talking about what you said about the body, right? And you're right. A lot of times we operate here up. We're kind of in our mind, in that ego, in that conscious space. And that's exactly what it is. There is a beautiful book by Bessel van der Kolk about the trauma, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And he explained it so beautifully. He's a trauma therapist, researcher. He's fantastic. He's helped, he's has worked in trauma institute. He has a lot of stuff, but it's based on the research that what happens with trauma, right? It stays in the body. But when we don't process the trauma, it stays in our bodies, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a lot of things in therapy. We don't only work with your head, right? And like, let's say in IFS, we always say, where does this part feels in your body, right? Because that's, again, where does the self feels in your body? And you can feel the shifts. That's why everyone goes, oh my God, how this is insane, because you actually feel the difference when you're in one part, when you're, let's say, in your critical part, right? How does that feel? The tension, the anxiety, like that's called. When you're in your angry part, how does that feel? When you're anxious part, all of those parts, they feel differently. They in the different parts of your body, right? And when you find that center, right, that core, or that the self energy, it feels very differently too. And I think as we talk through that, like, I feel like what you're saying, I agree with you. I'm not far from, like, I consider myself a spiritual person. So I agree with you absolutely. Like, I don't bring spirituality into therapy per se, in the sense, because everyone has their own ways and I cannot impose my way, right, onto people. But personally, I'm a very spiritual person. Like, I believe in higher power. I believe in God. I believe in souls. I believe in the reincarnation, in the quantum field, and all of those things that you're kind of referring to. I definitely believe in them. So it's not that because I'm purely like scientific and I'm a psychotherapist, I'm away from that. I feel like it's like, what this is saying, that all roads lead to Rome, or something like that.
Yeah, all roads lead to Rome.
That's right. There's just different roads, and it doesn't mean you're only gonna take one road. You can take 2, 3, 4. You can combine them, right? Wherever you get to the place of growth and healing, and understanding of yourself, and kind of really going deep, and like wherever you get that, as you said, like, through yourself, through your body, through your energy field, right? If this is what helping you, if this is how you're becoming better, if this is how you're becoming more self-aware and more staying in that self-energy, right? And not in your parts, then, it's a beautiful thing. So to me, there's no, I don't know, maybe different people have different opinions, but to me, there's no conflict between that. And I'll tell you more. I've seen a couple podcasts with like hardcore scientists that right now realizing that it's like they start doing research in the sense that the consciousness, and I'm not talking the mind, it's not the mind, it's not the ego, but the consciousness, this is what created this all. And I'm not talking about Deepak Chopra, and I'm talking Joe Dispenza. I'm talking a hardcore scientist that never believed, like neuroscientists, like they actually have proof now. They're developing proofs to show that this is what we're seeing is just a projection of our consciousness, right? It's projection of our brain and everything. The consciousness creates everything, right? So that's how do we get there? Everyone will choose their own way to get there, right? But I really hope everyone eventually will. Or we're going to come back to this earth until we will.
Well, you know what?
That's my own view.
It's funny because, you know, whether you want to call it a scientific approach or a spiritual approach is really, part of one of the things that I'm really trying to do with this project that I'm doing with the Allura code is it's really just fusing that, and just, you know, it's about raising it's about a lot of things, but in this context it's about, because it's about the awareness piece, because when you are working with your clients and you are present, the whole essence of you is coming through, right? Because you are naturally aligned with this work that you are doing. So therefore, the gifts and talents that you have in your being are allowed full permission for expression. And that is when we are living on our highest, in our highest expression, or our highest timeline, or, you know, being our most authentic selves, is when we really allow these, you know, these gifts that we have. And like you said, like the analogy about the dirty frickin' window, right? It's like, you know, when you start to connect with these deeper layers, after you've peeled away you've peeled away the conditioning and the societal beliefs and this and that, and you start fusing those pieces back together, you know, you start to integrate, you start to feel more whole, you know, you start to see things differently, you know, like, I mean, I can't tell you the number of things that I see differently now. And it's funny that you bring up the whole piece about the projection. And I love this. So there's an experiment that has been done countless. I mean, they've been doing it since the 1800s. It's called the double slit experiment. I'm sure you've heard of it. And basically,
Actually, I haven't.
Okay, so basically the way it works, I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but I'll give the electron version. So imagine you have a piece of cardboard and it's got two slits in it, and it's lined up, and there's another piece, like a background, and there's space in between. So what they do is they take their electron gun and they start firing electrons just one at a time. And what they notice over time is, and they, you know, they've got their sensors right there, right? Sensors are on, is that, as you would naturally expect, the electrons line up in accordance with the two slits, right? That's a third dimensional expectation. But here's where it gets interesting, is when they turn the sensors off and it's not being measured, then the particles behave completely different. So in other words, they don't know where the electron is going to show up. And what actually winds up happening is they create a fanning effect. So there's a solid line in the middle, and then there's two less solid and then there's space, and then there's two less solid lines, and then less and less and less. So what actually happens now is, because they're not being, the wave
observed.
It's not being collapsed. So now they're allowed to fan out, and the reason there's space is because a wave is like this. So when you have a trough and a valley that meet, they cancel each other out. So hence the space in between. And where this gets even more interesting is that, so because they don't necessarily know where the electron is going to show up, they call this a superposition, right? So this is a scientific way of saying about being multidimensional, because the electron could show up, it could be over here, it could be over here, it could be over here. So when you hear this thing about, you know, oh, we've got infinite potential, or there's a, you know, the version of you that you want to become is already inside of you, is true. Now, there is, obviously, it's a lot easier said than done, because your body and your field and your nervous system can only hold as much charge as it's able to. So in other words, if you're still running programs that are outdated that you've been running for 20 years about, about a traumatic event or something that happened, you're not going to be able to anchor that newer version of you that is, that's flying around the world on jets or is going on podcasts worldwide, that's healing rock stars or whatever your dream is, right? And that's where this work is so important. And but I just love the fact that how the work that you're doing is now quantifying what kind of like what I'm doing, because I'm just taking, I mean, we're basically speaking the same freaking language, but yours is just a more, I don't want to say traditional or conventional, because your approach is, in my opinion, is not conventional at all, because you're actually tapping into what is and allowing it to come through you. But that's just something that you do naturally anyway.
Yeah, you know what? If I'm getting you correctly, what you're saying is like when you have in your line of work or how you're seeing things is what you gotta do to be able to access your full potential and actually get, be that person that you want to be or wherever your goals are and dreams are, and be that authentic self with it's you have to kind of get rid of this programming. You got to get out of that box, because the box that's what limiting you, right?
Yeah.
Is that sensors. The box almost in that experiment would be that sensor, those sensors, right? Where the question becomes, how do you get, right? And maybe I would say it's probably the same in my words. It's just expanding yourself, right? Because we do limit ourselves. We put ourselves in the box. And listen, don't get me wrong. There is people go through really, really hard stuff that out of their control. Absolutely. I'm not taking that away at all. But knowing what I know, we do going through that stuff and the way our brain works, we keep limiting ourselves we keep putting ourselves in the box, and we keep running, as you said, the same programs, right? We keep going, we keep living by the same schemas, right? Where we're not that person anymore, or we're not in that circumstance anymore. So this is, how do we do this, right? Maybe the question becomes, and there's different ways how to do it, how to expand yourself, right? And what you said, I always ask myself, and if you want to be on that private jet or on that yacht, ask the question why. What is it for you? Because it can hold the key to answer that limit. Like one thing, because when we're an authentic self, it comes with this whole like getting into my potential, changing other people's life, and stuff like this. But if your goal is to be on that private jet, you really got to understand why. What are you holding there? Is this my self-worth? And that's what a lot of times it comes to, right? We all struggling with our self-worth because we think external factors will bring our sense of worth, right? So do you want to be on that private jet? What's the reason? Or you want to have, $10 million in your bank account. What's the reason? What are you going to do with those money? What are you going to do with that, right? Like, what is it? What is it for you? Is it this because you're going to have people going to be looking at you, or you're going to make feel bad about yourself? And I think a big part of therapy and spiritual practice is about that your self-worth is already there. You're whole, right? Like your true self, like you're the spirit, what is it called, Shanti, I think, and like it's already there, right?
Shanti and Shakti.
That's right. Is how do we get to that, right? Because we operating, to translate, we do a lot of times operating in our conscious mind, in our egos, right? In our parts, right? Is how to get to that. And I think my way, I wouldn't call it my way. But I think like the way it's really depends. Like I'm not the therapeutic approach I told you I'm using it's IFS. My personal, I guess, my personal way is meditations. Like I do a lot of meditations, right? Like I meditate every day, and that's definitely expanded my sense of self, of this authentic self, that self energy, so called, is the it's the mindful piece, right? Mindfulness piece is huge. And I can get a little bit more about that. It's the compassion, the self-compassion, right? All of those things, working on them together, that's kind of what it becomes by the end of the day. Because you can go through therapy, learn how to deal with your ego, for example, through CBT, learn how to like calm yourself down and continue like this, right? There's a little bit more to life than there's this deeper meaning to life, I believe, than just kind of surviving and getting all the material things and getting all of this. And don't get me wrong, we enjoy all the material things. We live in the material world, right? We live in a pretty world. But there is a deeper way of connecting with people and really seeing when you, and again, I don't know, maybe this is my ego talking, maybe it's not. But when you see a change, when you make a change in someone's life, and not because you're so amazing, but because in therapy, again, I don't tell people what to do. I walk alongside them, right? And this is another thing that they teach us. You're not an advisor. You're not a teacher. You're not, you're not a guide even. You walk alongside them. You create this space for them to look inside and find that strength, right? And find the something. But when you see people getting better because they walked alongside you, that's what it makes it so meaningful. And I think this is why for you too, and again, I may be extending and correct me when I'm wrong, that's why you kind of turned into line of work, because it's not just making yourself better. It's actually this internal calling for us, for you, for me, to make other people's lives better, to have them, for them to have that understanding.
Well, yeah, I
Right.
mean, for me right now, it's very transitional. Because obviously I'm still in real estate, but what I have found is that by taking a bit more of a mindful approach and bringing this work into real estate, it's been a very like the last few deals that I've done. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, I'm doing way less. I'm working way less than I was in the past, which is one thing. So I've gone from the hustle to the resonance, and I will only work with people that I could actually see myself kind of going out for dinner with or something like that. Just because I don't have the bandwidth anymore for these kind of head-centered types of experiences. It drains the F out of me.
Mhm.
So that's all been very helpful. I mean, it's still real estate and it's still chaos, and like, I've had a couple of pretty interesting things happen in the last month or so, anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But I think that, yeah, it's just having this, it's having this level of awareness of the shifts that are going on and kind of that next level. And so something that I kind of figured out was, so when we talk about purpose and we talk about like these different aspects of ourselves that we don't like per se, I mean, nobody likes feeling like or no one would consciously choose to feel like a victim or be angry all the time or be stressed or whatever. Because, I mean, let's face it, it's not fun and it doesn't feel good. It's horrible. The thing is, though, is that people identify with this so much that they think it's who they are. And without being able to create that space in between, so like when the trigger happens, before you automatically just become, Eckhart Tolle refers to this as the pain body, which is where, all of your shit lives, for lack of a better term. So your guilt, your shame, your judgments, your frustrations, but I'm also talking about the stuff that's really, really emotionally charged. And so, which kind of circles back to, with this work that I'm doing, is because I deal. So here's the thing, because I'm dealing with it with the energetic piece as well. So if you are, you know what a glass ceiling is, right? It's like, I want to be successful, but, right? So what that creates is it creates a very limiting flow of energy in the body, right? And what I mean by energy is I'm talking about the billions and billions of neurochemical transmissions that happen in our body every single day. So your autonomic nervous system running your heartbeat, checking the temperature, your thoughts about wiggling your foot, the pattern of speech and the brainwave frequency that we're running at right now in terms of having all this stuff, right? Because those electrical signals is what is actually what gives us life. It's the actual life in action, so to speak. It's that larger part of us that is actually at work, that's animating this human vessel that we're sitting in. And so when you can learn to tune into that, and I'm talking about like physically learning how to feel it in your body. And then once you get to a certain level, you can actually feel it outside your body. There's the limits to what you can do with this stuff is just, it's wild. But anyway, so once you learn to actually be able to feel what your life force feels like in your body and how it's tied to your emotions, and this goes back to what you were talking about in terms of the mindfulness, about actually like somatic mindfulness, about actually being able to feel, so this is what anger feels like in my throat, because most people are so numb to their emotions because the mind is constantly go, 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 and they're running on adrenaline. When they actually finally stop, everything just, it's like a party. Tequila comes out, the vodka comes out, there's some guy in the corner, he's doing shots, and just, all hell breaks loose. So by incorporating these, because once you get to a certain level of stillness, then that's where you become the lake. So if you think of the analogy of like a lake, so on the top, where the waves are, and it can be choppy, rough, windy, whatever. But when you get below the surface, and it's like the whole frickin' iceberg thing, right? You got the top, little bit, and then the real essence or the real body of everything is behind the scenes. So because we only see what we see in people, what we see on social media or what we see in having conversations. So anyway, getting back to the creating stillness, and this is really at the core of what I'm doing, is teaching people how to feel into their bodies and understanding that there's an energetic current that is constantly running through their bodies, and what it feels like for it to be in a coherent state, aka alignment, or when it's in a state of misalignment or incoherence. And so what this means is that we are now merging the two hemispheres of the brain and to be in line with the heart. And so what this does is it creates, so the brain becomes one. So now you have the logical and the creative side coming together. So now you have creative logic, or logical creativity, or creative analytics, or so you're not stuck in this. And this is the whole aspect of polarity. So the masculine is the positive polarity, the doing, the outward, whatever. And if we're stuck here, if we're here all the time, this is where people turn into dictators. This is where people become controlling. This is where people become violent, etc. And if we're over here too much, this is where people become they become powerless. This is where hopelessness exists. This is where victim mentality, scarcity, that's where this exists. Oh no, I could never do that. I could never go out. I could never go and be a freaking rock star. Obviously, I like to use like outlandish examples to illustrate my point. So kind of at the core of what I'm doing is, and there's lots of practical applications that you can do, because you want to change the physical, or the kind of like the physiology and the chemistry in the body, to get into a state of coherence. And this is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. You can be feeling stressed. You can be feeling upset. You can feel angry, but there is a level of mind, or there's a level of being that, or a state of being that you can bring into play that allows you to transcend simply what you're feeling in your body. And now you are the driver of the, so first it starts with awareness, and that's why meditation is wonderful, because you simply become the witness or the watcher of the sensation in your body. And if it's a really powerful sensation, like, you know, the response from an emotional trigger from a trauma, then, you know, if you're not prepared, you're just going to be re-traumatizing yourself, and that's absolutely ridiculous. So I love what you're doing in the sense of just guide. You're not, okay, you said you're not guiding people. You kind of are. You're not doing the work for them, but you're facilitating them with 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 paced instructions. So you're pacing and leading, right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. It's probably, there's a really good metaphor. It's like when a person's drowning. So as a therapist, you don't go and kind of like try to save them, right? Uh, or you don't like yell at them, okay, you go like from the shore, you don't go in the water and you kind of like put them on them, and it's you swim alongside them and you
Oh,
kind of,
okay. Ah, so kind
right?
of like a surrogate in a way.
Well, yes, we do. There's another part of that that's in therapy, will lend our limbic system to another person when they're going through emotions. You got to understand, a lot of times what we like, when people, we're very disorganized, especially people with trauma. All those pieces are scattered together, like in
Tell me
different
about it.
places, right? Or it's like a one ball of like tied up thread, like it's just like this, right?
Mm,
So what do we do in therapy first is we try to organize it. We try to understand. And by person describing, going through emotions, stuff like this, we reflect back to them by and making them understand what's going on with themselves, right?
mm,
We're lending our limbic system. We empathize with them. Because the biggest thing of it, when I feel seen, I feel like I matter, right? And if
mm,
I went through a lot of trauma or whatever it is, a lot of times, even without trauma, we don't feel like we matter. We don't feel whole. We don't feel worthy. But when somebody sees me and somebody says, wow, it must be really hard what you went through, I can feel your pain. Then you feel seen, right? It's based on attachment. This is based on attachment theory, right? So you create this safe attachment, this secure attachment that the person might have never had. And you create the space where a person can hear, can be seen, right? And that's where healing starts happening. So now I'm seen, now I matter. Now my internal world starting to become organized, right? So what do I do with this now, right? Like, what's the next step? And the next step is healing. So now let's take every of this thread and work with it and see where it's coming from. And it might have another whole ball of, like at the end of it, and that's okay. And that's the thing with therapy, it's okay. You meet people where they are. It's okay if you are if you have victim mentality, if you all of those things, right? So this is a very important part. I think that a lot of people struggle with, is because when we in a space where we tell ourselves it's not okay to be depressed, it's not okay to be anxious, it's not okay to be a victim, it's not okay to do this, it's not okay to do that. That's when we work from inner critic, and that's not where self-compassion lies. To heal, you have to become compassionate towards yourself. You have to start loving yourself. And I'm not talking, I know it's such a cliche about self-love, and it's just like, it's not about spoiling. It's being okay. It's accepting every part of you, right? And Jung talks a lot a bit about the shadow, and I think shadow work became so popular now, right? And we all put pieces of us in the shadow that we don't like, where the thing is like, well, who does this work? That's the critic. Because if you're in self energy, I call it motherly energy, right? But it's not a motherly, it can be fatherly, wherever it is. When you're in this all accepting energy and all of this and this compassionate space towards yourself, you're okay with every part of you. And this is where you become whole. It's not when you're at your best performance. It's not when you're the smartest. It's not when you're the most successful. It's when you're okay with how you are and your faults. And this is so important. A lot of times we grow up with our parents telling us, well, if you don't get good marks, then, I'm not going to love you. none of those exact words, but there's a lot of that, right? And that's just makes us feel like, oh my God, I'm not lovable if I'm not good enough. But the second you go to yourself, I'm okay wherever I am, with my mistakes, with my words, with my anxiety, I'm okay. That's when real growth starts happening. When you can take yourself as you are and love yourself as you are, this is the most liberating thing you'll feel in your whole life. And I think this is the part. And then you can relate to other people like that. Just imagine for a sec how great is to go through life, having all of the emotions, getting agitated on stuff and being okay with that. Right. And just riding the wave. And I think that's where mindfulness piece comes in, right?
And yes, now something that just occurred to me was that I've noticed in my own journey and with people that I've worked with is that, so for example, to start with, so I've done a lot of studying of mysticism as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's a whole other conversation, but one of the biggest things that they focus on especially when they're doing specific to healing work, like energy work, is, well, obviously is having a clean vessel. But the other thing is that, and I can use physical healing as an example. So when the body is trying to heal a scar or a broken bone or something, it requires an F load more energy. And there's actually a whole different physiology and chemistry that happens when this starts to facilitate. And I think that people not being aware of this fact is that, so I was doing a course back in 2015, and it was called, just for shits and giggles, I called it Brain Gym. And it was basically, there was this place in Thornhill that I went to. It was called MaxiMind, and it was basically to train your brain how to be, function better, more coherent, etc. And one of the first things that the facilitator said was that you will likely, more than not, your caloric intake will increase a fair bit. And so I believed him. But when I actually started to go through it, I was shocked as actually how much more I needed to eat in order to fuel the changes that were happening in my brain. So the reason why I bring all this up is because people can only process stuff when they're alert and they're rested and they've got energy, aka fuel, right? As opposed to, at the end of the day, or when you're tired, or you've had a stressful week or whatever, because your brain is not able to process what is happening as effectively, because you just don't have because you're tired and you've burned all your fuel for the day. What the brain does is it naturally starts reverting to these other more primitive parts of the brain, like the limbic system or the midbrain or wherever have you, in order to conserve energy, or quote unquote conserve your bandwidth. And this is where our emotions get exacerbated and accelerated, and they fall back into this whole thing about, this isn't working, I'm a failure, all this kind of stuff, or they get angry and they punch the pillow and then start crying, or whatever happens. Because, and this was something that I had to wrestle with for a long time, until I kind of figured it out. And it was like, well, no freaking wonder. It's because, like if you've been running on 3 hours of sleep for a week or something, and you're in therapy and you're trying to process all this stuff, and it just keeps, you just keep, like, you're spinning your wheels. Well, duh, it's because you're exhausted. So just a fair point I'd like to bring up, because I think there's a good piece of that for people, especially when they're starting out, that they don't understand that this work is very, because we're doing it consciously and it's not automatic, because now
It's work.
it is like, but for me anyway, the option of not doing it is not an option. Like,
that's right.
you get to that point of I can't freaking go another day with this as my experience. It doesn't happen. So
and that's, I guess, like, what are you saying? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So what I was going to say is so what are some of the things that, and this was kind of what I was getting at, kind of tying back to what I was getting at the beginning in terms of what are some of the most common challenges that you're seeing with your clients in their sessions right now?
Like in terms of symptomology, or like people dealing with, or
like themes. And I don't mean in the industry at long. I mean more specifically in your sessions. Like, are you dealing with people that are working through anxiety based on blah blah blah? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see if there's any commonalities that you're seeing in the people that you're working with.
And is it okay we take 2 seconds bathroom break? And
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I'll just stop the recording.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be back in a sec.